The Proffessors is brought to you by Blackborder.com, a Magic the Gathering site with the best stories and best pros in the game. You can also pre-order Magic 2011 boxes at $89.99, so go check out Blackborder.com today. Hello everybody and welcome to yet another episode of The Proffessors. This week we'll take a look at the newest Magic product, Archenemy, its rule system, what the product includes, and if it's worth buying. So let's draw. Last summer, Plane Chase was released as the first of its kind multiplayer Madness product. For $20 you got a 60-card deck with 8 rares, a deck box, a Plane Chase die, and a deck of 10 Plane cards. There were 4 different decks to collect, and they all came in these kind of bulky boxes that already made it unappealing to some players. But unlike the Duels of the Planeswalkers decks I reviewed 2 weeks ago that came in those nice, shiny, streamlined boxes, Plane Chase was worth the $20 you dropped for it. While it's true that a 60-card deck should normally be worth around $10, being that the dual decks in 1995 got you 2 60-card decks, the oversized cards have a value that transcends whatever the cover price says. While you can buy all 40 planes from a site like Star City Games for $4, being that they're worthless and competitive, there's something to be gotten from these cards that can have a monetary value placed on it, and it makes buying Plane Chase worth it for casual players and pros alike. Then again, there were some kinks to be worked out with this format, being that it wasn't a previously popularized multiplayer format. It didn't have the support of format like Elder Dragon Highlander did. As a result, some of the playing cards had some balance issues, even in a multiplayer format. The decks were just fine and balanced. In fact, while it appeared Strike Force was a broken deck, Metallic Dreams in a one-on-one match, which was thought to be the worst deck, could do just fine, at least in my experience. However, some of the planes added too much randomness to the format. That 1 in 6 chance of rolling the Chaos symbol was just high enough to annoy everyone else at the table, or would result in that player being the only player with untapped permanents on the board. Also, any player could change the plane, so the individual players never had much skill involved if they had mana to throw into the ether. That said, still a fun and authentic looking format. Fortunately, the format was supported by Wizards over the following year, too. You could always get the product throughout this past year, and 2 new planes were released for Zendikar and Worldwake that you got for playing at the pre-release. But for the problems of the format, how do we fix them? What recreation of the format would make it so that people have a way to battle something as a team? The answer is for the players to have a common enemy, say an archenemy. That's where this product starts. Now, to modify the Plane Chase rules correctly, this format has made it so that, ideally, 2 or 3 players can verse 1 player. Now, as you're probably aware, the way the game evens this out for the Archenemy, the player on their lonesome, gives them scheme cards. The Archenemy gets to play 1 scheme card per turn. At the beginning of their main phase, they flip over the top scheme card from their scheme deck. He or she sets this campy named scheme card into motion. Setting a scheme into motion isn't like casting a spell, as it can't be countered, but it goes on the stack and can have abilities or spells played in response to it while it's on the stack. Assuming the scheme resolves as normal, you then activate the ability of the scheme. Some do really useful things like let you draw 4 cards and give you an unlimited hand size for the remainder of the turn. Others give you a technically smaller effect that is multiplicative based on the number of opponents in the match, like giving you 2/2 zombies for each opponent. After the ability occurs, the scheme is then abandoned, unless it's an ongoing scheme. If the card is an ongoing scheme, then you get to play its effect every turn until you are forced to abandon the scheme because the card makes you based on a clock, or because there's a trigger that gets set off. In addition to these scheme cards, the Archenemy gets to start the game and draw a card on his first turn, as well as get 40 life. The other side of the table also gets a fundamental downgrade because their single turn works like a 2-headed giant turn, in which they take a single turn and have to play their untap step, then upkeep, then draw step, then main phase, and so on as a team, which means that you can't lend your teammates mana or declare your attackers separately, so that effects activated on the declare attacker step of the combat phase don't lose effectiveness. But hey, for the good guys, the game's pretty one-sided as is. Now, like playing cards, Wizards will be supporting this format for probably the next year. They've already announced a new ongoing scheme that lets you chip away at the opponent with the highest life total. Here it is. Hopefully they'll announce more cards like these in the future to remind us that the format exists, because, to be honest, when we have other cool casual formats like Emperor, in which you get 6 players, 2 teams of 3, and have each team have an Emperor and 2 walls, with the walls attacking the opposing walls and the Emperors attacking the other walls until both walls have been destroyed, at which time the opposing team attacks the Emperor, or 5-color Magic, in which you have a 300-card deck with at least 25 copies of cards of each color, or a Titanic Magic, in which all players have 1,000 life and aim to take their opponent out via the biggest spells possible, but where alternative win conditions are banned, Archenemy just doesn't have that epic Timmy appeal about it. Speaking of which, what is your favorite casual competitive format? But is the product worth the 20 bucks? How would I rank it compared to other products? Well, you bet I'd rate it above the Duels of the Planeswalkers decks from last time's special, and I'd even suggest purchasing an Archenemy deck over chancing the random packs, commons, uncommons, and basic lands from the Deck Builder's Toolkit. However, I can't say I'd suggest this product over dual decks like Phyrexia versus the Coalition. Why? Because the latter gives you two 60-card decks to play with, as well as two foily alternate art versions of two expensive enough to make you money when you can cash them in later cards. Also, both decks in the dual decks are balanced, so you can play with a friend, while the Archenemy deck just gives you a single deck against which your opponents have to build a balanced deck to play with. But for the Legacy player, there is Reanimate in one of these. But we'll check out Phyrexia versus the Coalition dual decks in 2 weeks. And just a note, I was able to show you guys some nice cinematics for the Duels of the Planeswalkers deck review that, to me, made me feel like I was holding the actual product just by watching the review. But I couldn't afford it for the Archenemy deck. If anyone could hook me up with a particular product in the future, it'd be much appreciated. So until next time, this is Anthony Palmario, on behalf of the Professors. We're tapped out for now, but we'll untap soon.